is the Auburn Podcast, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm Zach Blackerby, joined by Painter Sharpless. What's up, my guy? How are you?
Hello, Zach Blackerby.
Good to see you, friend. And, yeah, we got another guest today.
Oh.
The one and only Michael Pappas of ESPN 1067. What's up, man?
The front door.
Nothing much. I'm excited to be here. Excited to be back.
Yes. Last time you were here, you got some mean tweets thrown your way.
So what'd you do?
Was that the last time you came on with the Nick Marshall stuff? Was that right?
No. That was.
Have you come on since then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Will and I were here talking about.
Yeah. That's right.
Did you fall into the popular trap of saying Nick Marshall got worse this second season? Because that seems to be a common belief that's incorrect.
I think you just said it wasn't a passing threat.
Yeah,
right?
I just don't think Nick Marshall was a good quarterback. I think that he was good.
Yeah, we're not going down that again.
Yeah.
We're not touching on that. All right. So yesterday at the start of the show, Painter and I mentioned that we're going to take some questions. And we had a few good ones, a few really good ones where I'm like, I actually don't really know how I'm going to answer a few of them. But let's see. Colonel Steve, we'll start with that one. He asked, will Gatewood be a passing threat? No one has really seen his ability in a game. And he also used the hashtag Auburn Podcast. That's the first time that's ever been done.
Thank you, Steve.
So shout out to Colonel Steve. But yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on it a little bit, Painter. I mean, that's kind of the big question on this quarterback competition. And that's kind of why the guys with the least amount of experience, being Gatewood and Bo Nix, are kind of the favorite to win the job. Because Malik Willis, you know, it's a small sample size. It's bigger than the other two, obviously. But it's like, well, what we've seen is he can't really throw it consistently. So that's the big question, you know. And has Joey Gatewood gotten better? Possibly. We don't know. And that's what's going to make this really interesting over the next few months.
This answer is going to suck, but you kind of just said it. I don't know, because we didn't get to see it in high school. He split time in high school, and then he got here and he was injured. So, yeah, we're assuming that Joey Gatewood has gotten better in that area. We're assuming that there's development that's happened under Gus Malzahn. Deshaun Davis spoke highly of Joey Gatewood. We know he's a good athlete. Like, that part isn't the question. Mm-hmm. What can he do through the air? And honestly, he doesn't have, because he's such a good athlete, because we've seen other good athletes, while I'm not going to jump on board with Michael's point that Nick Marshall's in a good quarterback, we can all agree that he's not the purest of passers the SEC's ever seen, and Gus Malzahn managed to make that work. So how good does he have to be is maybe the more important question, because I don't think he's ever going to be a pure passer. I just wonder how much progression he's made since high school. And even in high school, we really, there's a limited amount of throwing that you got to see because of him splitting time.
But a lot of scoring. I mean, the guy has shown that when he was on the football field that the offense, that Barnum Trail was probably going to score a touchdown that drive, just because he was able to do so many different things, including play wide receiver and catch the football. But I think you could argue, though, also just kind of the way Auburn's roster is built right now, he's coming into a situation, you know, just to kind of bring up the Nick Marshall thing again, but he's going to have more help, I believe, at wide receiver than past Malzahn quarterbacks did.
And we'll also see if Malzahn decides to just lean into the whole speed angle, right? Because we've got on this offense Sean Shivers, we've got Anthony Schwartz, all this track speed, and Joey Gatewood, it looks like is going to be the fastest of the quarterbacks, the most athletic of the quarterbacks. I mean, Malik Willis we've seen in this offense, it doesn't seem like he's really got, I don't want to say breakaway speed. He's obviously a very athletic guy, but it certainly seems like Gatewood is the most athletic of the bunch. So maybe Gatewood can get the nod just based on that athleticism and just based on Gus might want to pair him with this All-American speed he's got on the edge to really go back to the days of Auburn fast.
Yeah. All right, we've had a Fanatics item of the day for the past few days, and we will plan to continue to do that moving forward. Painter, tell us about the Fanatics item of the day today.
I'm a huge fan of this. There's a lot going on.
It's the best one yet.
And let me just be clear, there have been some other good ones. Really enjoyed our Tuesday item. The shirt was a nice breathable material, but today...
Long sleeve, too, I like. Yeah.
Today, number 21. Can we guess who that number 21 jersey is?
Kerryon Johnson.
Kerryon Johnson, that's right, an Auburn Tiger Under Armour replica alumni football jersey in Navy. It's on sale. You've got 12 hours. Come on, jump on it. Kerryon had a great rookie season. Hopefully he's back. He's healthy. We've seen him in videos anyway, training at Auburn. So get yourself a Kerryon Johnson jersey.
It's a good-looking jersey.
Right. If you want it for parties, if you want it for Christmas, maybe just to wear around the office on Jersey Day.
Right.
Show off your pride.
Right.
It's there. It's at Fanatics. It's our item of the day. Kerryon Johnson. You love him. You know him. Might as well get the jersey while you're at it.
Yeah, check out the link in the show notes, however you're listening, whether it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Stitcher as well. But speaking of Kerryon and running backs, I wanted to read a conversation that I had with a friend of mine, a listener, Sky. He's kind of over powerofdixieland.com, kind of an Auburn blog that does some things. But he wanted to get my opinion on a top 10. He's working on a top 10 piece to put out before spring training starts, and he wanted to part of the list is him compiling the top 10 names, kind of going into the season. And he sent me the top 10, and he mentioned 2 guys that he left out. And long story short, I was like, I would put those 2 guys in over some people. And he asked, who would you take out? And he had Boobie Whitlow at 9th, I believe. He had him in his top 10. And I told him, and Painter, I think I've been pretty clear about this, like I'm not fully on the Boobie Whitlow hype train as much as most people are. I've seen glimpses of it, and then something happens or he'll get hurt, and some of it's out of his control as far as play calling and scheme and all that. But let's see. He said he sent this back to me. Whitlow had the 3rd best season ever for a freshman running back in Auburn's history. SEC all-freshman team. Whitlow ranked 1st in the SEC in rushing yards among freshman running backs with 787 yards on the ground at 5.25 yards per carry, 960 offensive yards from scrimmage, as well as accounting for 9 total touchdowns. For comparison's sake, let's look at Kerryon Johnson's freshman year, 208 yards rushing, 4 yards per carry, 159 yards receiving, and 3 total touchdowns. As a sophomore, Kerryon had 895 yards rushing, 4.9 average, 125 yards receiving, and 11 total touchdowns. Most of Auburn's running backs in modern history have greatly improved each season with more opportunities. The reason I like Boobie so much is his toughness. When Jarrett Stidham fumbled versus Tennessee, and despite Boobie playing with an injured shoulder, he literally sacrificed his body and shoulder as he attempted to leap on the football. So I thought those stats were interesting. And they're actually a little better than I thought they would be, just kind of looking back, and I went and double-checked them. But I still think a lot of that, though, just has to be he's a freshman running back, starting running back in Auburn's system. Mm-hmm. But I still think it's kind of an interesting point that he brought up.
I'm more in the Whitlow camp than you are.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's reason to question some of Whitlow moving forward. Mainly, though, for me, it's injury. Like, I think there's, as you just read out, clearly potential there. He's a young player. Citing toughness is an interesting one because it's like, how do you measure that? But the example he used, I thought, was certainly a good one. I'm more into what Whitlow can do in year 2. What I think will benefit him greatly is that the offensive line almost certainly cannot be as bad in run blocking as they were this year. I think if that unit is just solid, again, I don't think this will be an elite offensive line group, but if they are solid, then there's no reason to think, in my mind, that Boobie Whitlow can't get back to the 1,000-yard rusher we're accustomed to seeing. I will say this, though. In the bowl game, he didn't get a lot of usage. You saw a little bit more balance, I thought, with some of the other backs.
He did have a big play, though.
Right, and that came through the air. So if it wasn't going to be an injury that could derail it, I just wonder if it would be splitting more carries between some of the other backs that could limit some of the productivity, which might not be a bad thing.
I'm the opposite of Zach. I'm a huge Boobie Whitlow fan. I think he's going to be a star, whether it's this upcoming season or his junior season, like we saw Kerryon break out in his junior season. I think that Boobie's got a great combination of power and speed, and while he may not have that breakaway speed to finish a 65-yard run for a touchdown, I'm perfectly fine with picking up 45 instead of 65.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think something that has kind of skewed my perception of what Whitlow has done so far is, one, I think offensive line play, and I think Auburn has just kind of always had solid run blocking until
last season.
Yeah,
right.
I was going to say recently, but you're right, until last season. So, and also, I don't know exactly how much of a fully healthy Boobie Whitlow we've seen, and so I think that's obviously something that's going to hinder him as well. Staying on the topic of running back, Sean Shiver's Instagram story right now is him screenshotting his page on auburntigers.com on the official roster. And he's got an 8 next to his name. And he said his caption is back to the basic V8. So I'm all for that. His Twitter thing and Instagram stuff. No, it's just his Twitter. V8 Blazin. Mm-hmm. All about it. All about it. That guy's the man.
I know you love him. I just don't know what else to add to that. I think that...
Let's just talk about how great he is for 30 seconds.
I don't understand. I don't understand. What do you mean he has an 8 next to his name? Like
that's his jersey number.
Okay, that's what I assumed, but I didn't. Okay.
So now...
So maybe that's fair that you asked that. Maybe that's fair that you asked that.
Switching numbers?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that was the
point of him posting that. Got it. Maybe I wasn't clear on that. No, I'm glad you said that because I'm sure someone listening was like, what is Zac saying? So that's good. That was a good addition.
Now...
V8 Blazin, I'm on board. I love it.
He's fast. Is there anything positive you'd like to say now that we've turned it over to Shaun Shivers talk? Like we haven't talked about him in a while, so you got to have something up your sleeve.
I just like talking about how great he is, and I hope that he's used better this year.
Yeah, I could say
a lot of guys are used better.
That's true. That's totally true.
Give that man an Anthony Schwartz touches, please and thank you.
Yeah.
Like I know that you know more than I do, Gus Malzahn, but just watching those two guys play screams they could use some more touches.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I don't think that's rocket science.
Why does Anthony Schwartz not return punts and kicks? That's my thing that I don't really understand.
It's a different skill set. I mean, as far as vision and patience and all, I mean, you got to be... Speed obviously helps with literally everything.
Because like Ryan, we would say, is not the fastest guy, but he clearly had the ability to make people miss and had some vision. At least in last year's punt returning game, I thought he did a solid job. But, Anthony Schwartz is definitely faster than Ryan
I feel
Davis.
like Anthony Schwartz would have to make one guy miss.
And then
Yeah,
but I think when you look at the all-time greats in kick returns, like your Deion Sanders, your Prime Time, and your Devin Hester, while they were fast, I don't think that's why they were the best returners ever. You know what I mean?
Yes, you are correct. But
it doesn't hurt. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, addition to, Devin Hester was the first guy in Madden, I think, to get 99 speed or 100 speed or something like that. And yes, patience and vision and all that is important, but you can't teach a guy to run as fast as Anthony Schwartz is. You can teach a guy what he needs to be looking for, how to be more patient, how to improve the vision. I mean, we see it happen with running backs all the time. Maybe he'll return.
Argument there. Like Shaun Shivers is just a tad slower, and he's on kick returns. Like, I'm not totally disagreeing with you. I think some of it, like you're saying, has to be something you can learn, but I think also some of it does seem instinctual, which I don't know how to quantify that. But
right. I talked with Marcus Davis a lot about punt returns and just how everything went into it. And he's like, man, I think a lot of people would be shocked how much goes into just a simple punt. And even though a lot of them are like, you call for the fair catch, 2 seconds into it, he's like, but all of the scheme and like the X's and O's and the prep and all that, everything going through the punt returner and the special teams call, special teams coaches call going into all of that. He's like, I think most people will be blown away by it.
While we're on the topic, there seems to be a growing movement. I think we'll get there eventually to rid ourselves of kickoffs. Where do y'all stand on that? Because I enjoy special teams a lot, but the more I read about how dangerous the play is, especially on kick returns, I can see why there's this movement to push it. On the other hand, to me, it's a really exciting part of the game.
We've got the biggest fan of the AAF here in studio with us, and
it's true.
I just for me personally, like whenever I watch an AAF game, I don't really notice that it's gone.
I think it'll never happen in either college football or the NFL.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I agree.
I think
but if it went away, I wouldn't miss it a whole lot.
Yeah, I think it's fine in the AAF, but one of the things they pitched it as was basically one fewer commercial, I guess, and the game will move quicker, and therefore there'll be more points scored or something. But you're taking out one of the most potentially the most exciting play in the game.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And you're taking out the potential for an onside kick, one of those surprise ones like Sean Payton pulled off in the Super Bowl against the Colts that one year. And so it's just not going to happen. The coaches won't agree to it. The owners won't agree to it. In the NCAA, it's not going to happen if for no other reason than you're costing kids scholarships.
Right. No, you're right about that. I agree with you. If you're listening to the show, we appreciate the support already, but if you want to go just a little bit farther to help us make this a year-long daily podcast, please support the show by visiting our Patreon page. You can go to the show notes, however you're listening to the show, and click on the link next to support the show, or you can go to auburnpodcast.com and click on become a patron, and it will take you to our Patreon page. We would greatly appreciate it. I've got a few messages this week saying that folks will sign up on Friday, so that's really encouraging. We appreciate it. Looking at more questions from listeners, Randy tweets at us the question: with Schwartz more than likely becoming the starting flanker, what roles are left for Eli Stove and Will Hastings? Also, does TD Moultrie go back to playing linebacker now with the possible emergence of Jubinor as a Buck? So let's talk about the flanker position, and what do you guys envision for Eli Stove and Will Hastings this season? Obviously, coming back from injuries, both of them. I think we see them kind of at the same clip that we saw when they were healthy. Maybe you see a little bit more Will Hastings, but Will Hastings was kind of used different than they used the flanker. I mean, they threw to Will Hastings down the field. And also, I think some of what Will Hastings did from a production standpoint, one, I think the guy's a good route runner, but I do think a lot of it had to do with Stidham and his chemistry and connection. I don't think it's just a given that Hastings is going to connect as well, one, coming after an injury, because when he relies on his ability to cut and run routes. But two, I don't think it's a given that he is going to be able to just kind of have that same connection with, like he did with Stidham, with Gatewood or Willis or Bo Nix, whoever wins the starting job.
He's going to be a safety valve. That's his role on the team. The big third down completion on third and medium, and then the occasional, deep pass. He's a good receiver, shifty, like you said, and he's going to live in that, 6 to 9 yard range. Excuse me, for the most part. I think he'll play better when he can be that for Bo Nix, if Bo Nix is the starting quarterback. But it'll allow Auburn's offense, he will allow Auburn's offense to not rely as on the running back as the check down. If the running back needs to stay in for pass pro, he can, because you can have someone who works really, really well in that 5 to 8 yard range as essentially a check down or a safety valve. As far as Eli Stove, I really thought he was going to transfer. I'm not convinced he's going to have, I don't want to say any role, but a big enough role for him to be satisfied in this offense coming up. I feel like...
I think he's Schwartz's backup.
Yeah, I just feel like have brought in too much talent that's just kind of surpassed him in the last year and a half.
I think if they move him around, I could actually see Eli Stove being kind of that safety valve role as well. I mean, they like to put Will Hastings down the field with those double moves and all. He did a lot of stuff within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. I'm not disagreeing with what you said, and I think the stats back that up. But, you think of the most memorable plays by Will Hastings are those, the double moves against the safety.
Just leave someone frozen.
Right. So,
and wide open.
And I think you see a few of those throughout the season.
Also, the interesting point to note there, I think that applies to Stove and to Hastings, is that Hastings is competing with Matthew Hill and Javarius Johnson, and Hill was a guy that a lot of people, I think, expected to have the season that Seth Williams had.
Yeah,
where he really came on the scene, and instead that didn't happen. And Javarius Johnson, I think, could be an excellent freshman as well. So I'm just curious to know how they get those two guys involved. I think that while Stove probably takes somewhat of a backseat compared to Schwartz, he's still used. He found use certainly a few seasons ago before his injury. Hastings, to me, is tricky because I don't think he's as athletic as Matthew Hill or Javarius Johnson.
Yeah.
But certainly he has a role. So I don't know if we'll see as much of Will Hastings this year just because of what Matthew Hill brings to the table, and maybe, could be premature, but maybe what Johnson also brings to the position. It's sort of a similar position to Stove, is that it's a really, really deep unit.
You guys have both said that you think Stove is going to be Schwartz's backup, and that really terrifies me because we've seen Gus Malzahn take preference to older players, guys that are more experienced, and so him being Schwartz's backup worries me that Stove is actually going to end up being the starter, and Schwartz is going to be the backup again.
Or even if it's a 50-50 split,
yeah, that's not enough.
It doesn't
Schwartz.
need to be.
Yeah.
No, you're right. You're right. May the Schwartz be with Auburn's offense. You know what I'm saying? But I think Will Hastings, I think he's going to kind of have, some big catches throughout the year, and like Michael said, on third down, I think those will be kind of ones that you forget about, but obviously were important, based on, the time and positioning of the game. But I think what his role is going to be as far as how he helps this team is being a leader in the locker room. And I think that's a trait that a lot of people kind of forget about. They look at stats and all, but I think Will Hastings is an important part of this team regardless of how many catches. I bet he was important last year as far as being a leader.
Is there something also valuable about having a guy like Hastings on the field? Simply, if you're a defensive back, because you're concerned, you realize again, not the most athletic guy in the unit, and probably not the guy that will receive anywhere close to the most targets or have the most receiving yards, but a safety or a corner simply going to be aware of exactly what you're talking about, the ability to get beat and change the dynamic of the game. So I think it's almost interesting that his value could also simply be the concern of taking someone out of position or keeping some part of the field open. I think that Hastings, compared to Hill and Johnson, doesn't have the same level of upside.
All right, then the follow-up to Randy's tweet. Also, does T.D. Moultrie go back to playing linebacker now with the possible emergence of Jubinor as a buck? And, I heard people talking about this throughout the season last year, maybe even going into the season, as far as, the emergence of Big Cat and some other guys, Jubinor, later in the season. Because the big thing about Richard Jubinor, and I know a friend of the program, Ben Wolk of AuburnSports.com, he absolutely loved Jubinor as a recruit, but made it very clear, this guy's going to have an impact later in his career just due to how raw he is. But then all of a sudden, the end of his first year here, it's like, oh, okay, this guy's figuring out how to make plays and get on the field. I don't think it's out of the question that, T.D. Moultrie kind of gets lost a little bit. I think they're going to find ways to get him on the field just because of his explosiveness and the ability for him to use his hands and kind of get that first step. But I just think this kind of goes back to the overall depth of Auburn's defensive front seven. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think one thing we know Auburn missed last year was the ability to have a third down pass rusher like they did a couple of seasons ago. And now I'm blanking on his name.
Jeff Holland?
Yes. And so Jubinor, his athleticism and ability to pass rush, I think could be something that Auburn missed last season. I think T.D. Moultrie, who came in expecting to play as a linebacker, there was a lot of experience and some depth at the position last year, so it made sense to try him out at the defensive line unit. Well, now this year, linebacker doesn't have the same experience and depth as that defensive front seven or the defensive line, excuse me. So to me, it would make a lot of sense to put him at linebacker because the line is unquestionably a strength, and I think it gives him a better opportunity to see the field.
Yeah, and when TD was recruited, Malzahn made it very clear at the press conference following signing day that TD was listed as a linebacker because it was very important that he was recruited as a linebacker. So that'll be interesting to see moving forward. Let's see, we got another question from Austin. Who is the first backup tackle on the field if one of our assumed senior starters go down? Same question at guard and center. So looking at your starters, you got Tega, Horton, Kim, Harold, and Driscoll. So I think Austin Troxell is in that conversation.
It's got to be him or Osborne, right? Because Bailey Sharp, I mean, he's coming up on his senior season, and Salmons really the light hasn't flipped on the way, and like Tega, he was sort of new to football, but I think it either has to be the experience of Troxell, who at times competed for a tackle job last year, or Osborne, the freshman, as you're looking ahead to the 2020 year where there could be a shortage of offensive linemen, getting someone ready. Yeah,
and then Brahms is going to be in that. I think he's too deep on the offensive line. Cam Stutz is kind of interesting. I've heard good things about him, so we'll see. We'll see what he's. He's a force to move for sure. So we'll see what that looks like. And moving on to Auburn basketball, and we purposely have kind of not talked about the SEC tournament just because I want the podcast to have a little bit of life to it. But there's a story in the OA News about how Bruce Pearl and some of the team Tuesday, when Beauregard went back to school after the first time they returned to school since the horrific storms that hit Lee County, and I just thought it was awesome that Bruce Pearl and some of the players. The story kind of featured Anthony McLemore, but it looked like other folks were out there. But Aubie was out there, and I just thought it was pretty cool. They kind of took it upon themselves to make sure they could do whatever they can to get those kids smiling going back into school. I think that is awesome.
Yeah, it's a nice story. I'm with you. I think that it's nice to see that the team seems to be aware of what's going on around them. And for a lot of those guys that are not from Auburn, it would be easy to take the line that this, hasn't impacted them. So sometimes also it can be almost tiresome, and I don't think this is what it was. I think this was genuine because we've seen Coach Pearl lead in that way. I think he's come across to me as a guy who really likes Auburn and wants to be a part of the community. But sometimes you see famous people, athletes, entertainers at events, and it's like it almost feels like it's for the photo. And in this instance, I get the sense that Coach Pearl and his team really do care about the community, even though a lot of them won't live here forever.
Yeah, I just thought that was a cool story that needed to be told. But awesome. So that wraps up today's show. Tomorrow's show on Fridays through the offseason, we're going to air previously aired shows, just from a rebroadcast of a mailbag show that we did. Painter and I did with Rich Perkins a few weeks ago. So be sure to check that out. And if you haven't heard any of the shows from this week, all of them are pretty not time specific at all.
It's been fun too.
Yeah, so the past few weeks. So be sure to check that out. Michael Pappas, thanks for hanging out with us today. Where can people find you and hear you, man?
I am on the SEC Report with Will Shuddy from 1 to 2 p.m. every weekday. I'm on the AAF Report on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. with Justin Ferguson, and on the Couch Potato Podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Painter?
You can hear Justin Ferguson and me from 11 to 1 on ESPN 106.7 if you're in Auburn, Opelika. Of course, that's just on your dial, 106.7. Or if you're at work, you can hear it at ESPNAU.com or on the ESPN 106.7 app. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at PaintSharpless.
I'm at Z Blackerby on Twitter and all of the social medias. We will be back tomorrow. Have a fantastic day. This has been another edition of the Auburn Podcast.